We are joined with the man himself, Jeff Rich. Jeff, how you doing, man? You doing okay this morning? Well, this evening.
I'm I'm doing really well here in this evening in Australia, morning in America, and evening wherever you are, isn't it, Jamal too?
Yeah, you're two
I
hours
mean, I
away
don't
from
want to
me.
break the fourth wall, but
No, you're fine. You're
evening, morning,
you're,
sure.
you're fine. I always break the fourth wall. I've been making
Yeah,
comments about my ex girlfriends and everything else. No, you're perfectly fine. I'm in Malaysia, so I'm 2 hours away from you. So I feel
yeah,
your
yeah,
pain
yeah.
on some
Not too
level.
bad. Yeah,
In regards to these time zones. It's typically a morning show in America. At some point, I'm going back to America, in which case it's going to be a morning show again.
yeah.
I didn't think it was fair to my audience to just to be like, okay, we're going to have it 3 in the morning. It's like, dude, what the hell? So I take the burden on this one. I'm glad you could
Good
join me, man.
analysis, I think. Yeah, I was
Just so the
listening
audience will
in
know.
as you were saying that, and yeah, it seems a good
Oh, no,
analysis
go
to
ahead,
me.
please. Finish that. I'm sorry, finish that comment. I was going to introduce you
Well,
with
I
the
really
next.
do think Trump is in time trouble. Ukraine's in time trouble. Like it's collapsing militarily, collapsing
Yes.
in terms of its political authority, collapsing economically, collapsing socially. It could easily be in a situation where it's a really disorderly arrangement before too long. If there's going to be some kind of peace process, someone needs to actually uh, get it started pretty soon, I think.
Agreed.
We can go into that a little bit more after you introduce me.
Yeah, let me introduce you. Jeff Rich. I'm sorry, we have this tendency to start before we start. Jeff Rich, he's an author, historian, podcaster who worked 33 years in government. He's now retired, currently living in Melbourne, Australia. Jeff has spent a lifetime studying history and how knowledge of historical currents can help give context to changing political world. You can find Jeff on YouTube on the Burning Archive. It is a fantastic channel. Again, I say this and I mean it. I put emphasis on it because I mean it. And you can find him on Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. Language is a funny thing. Like
Mm.
if somebody says, how do I look in this? And it's like, yeah, you look okay. And if you ask the same question, someone says, oh my God. Okay, you're saying the same
That
thing, but those are
bad?
very different things. Like the person understands that in the first case, okay, they don't like what I'm wearing. In the second case, there's more emphasis on it, so it makes it worse, even though it's the same.
Yeah.
Now, man, you have a great show. You really
Thank
do.
you.
So let's get into that. That is that to me is the most fascinating part.
Mm.
So there are people who are very cynical about this, and I guess I am kind of, but I also lean on this thing of, well, if you don't do anything, it is going to collapse, and it seems to be collapsing fast and
Mm.
faster than many people I think thought.
Mm.
Like if you're looking at the battlefield now at Konstantinovka, Zaporozhia, Kherson, Petrovsk, like all of these
Mm.
places are being pushed at once, where Slaviansk and Kramatorsk almost seem to be flanked at the same time that they're going through these other maneuvers on the battlefield. This is a
Mm.
disaster. Like they're going to take the entirety of the Donbass within a few months potentially.
Mm.
And so, if you're Trump and you know that, what do you do?
Mm.
It seems that this is what you have to do, even
Mm.
if world primacy is still your objective. Kind of like in Syria. Okay, we'll take a break and we'll come back to this in 15 years.
Mm.
It's not that the agenda has changed, it's just that in a tactical sense, you failed in this
Mm.
moment and you need to resolve that failure in a way that's not catastrophic to your interests. Give me your take on this because Europe doesn't seem to know this and Zelensky doesn't seem to know this.
Yeah. Well, I think Trump's still dreaming big in terms of, making America great again and all that sort of stuff, making the empire great again. But, one thing Donald Trump does know how to do is, declare bankruptcy and protect his own assets. And I think to some degree, they're in that situation with Ukraine. The Ukraine is a bankrupt project that's failed. It's obvious that it's failed. And if he hangs around there too much longer, it's going to drag him down with them. And so, I mean, I've taken the view ever since like Trump really came in and started making noises about closing the ending the war. Is that what he wanted to do was end the war, not create a peace, and what he wanted to do was end the war in the way most favourable to America, which was avoid the humiliation of a Kabul 2.0 or Saigon 3.0, and also to get whatever loot he could out of Ukraine. That was the minerals deal, and he's tried various methods since then. But he's really in the situation now where it could be a really, 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 much worse than Kabul 2.0 situation, really. Like a really, actually quite humanitarian. I mean, Kabul 2.0 was pretty bad humanitarian-wise, but I think this could be even much worse. And, with all of European media, all of British media, ready to turn the spotlight on Trump and say, you cock this up real bad, Donald. So he wants to I think get out as quickly as he can with as much damage, and his time's running out too. Like it's only 15 months or so to the midterm elections. Yep. And prospects are probably not great for him at that time. So he's got a sense of the clock running, and the Russians must know that too. So the Russians must know that they know that the US, can't really negotiate proper agreements. They know that Trump is on borrowed time to some degree. They know that he's a pretty disorderly guy who's got a pretty divided executive. So they probably want to use this opportunity as much as they can to get something concrete and specific that America can actually deliver. So yeah, I totally feel Brian Bledek and all those guys sort of nervousness and wariness about this being a trap. And there's been a report today about a possible false flag type situation. But at the same time, there's just been a report today that Lavrov's going to be participating in the summit, which presumably means Rubio is going to be participating in the summit, which I think means that there's going to be a level of professionalism that Donald Trump's not entirely accustomed to. He won't be doing all the talking in the meeting. I think he'll probably say, okay, this is what I want to get out of it. Marco, can you take it from here?
So Rubio and Lavrov apparently spoke today.
Yeah.
Today or yesterday. It depends on the time zone that you're in. Which sounds like they are creating a context for whatever the meeting is going to be. And Donald Trump is acting as if Putin came to him. It wasn't that way. It was the other way around. He sent Witkoff over to Moscow with a deal or with some kind of thing. And the Russians, Yushikov, apparently said something to the effect of, okay, we had basically a basis by which to have a conversation. Now, they're talking in the U.S., Europe and the U.S. are talking to themselves about land swaps. Russia is being very tight-lipped. They haven't said squat. For them, it's we negotiate when we negotiate. We don't need to have this conversation openly. Rudy, Ruta, thank you, talking about has moderated his position. Now, I think part of the reason he's moderated his position is because of this article by Slavian Grad, and it's not Slavian Grad, but they put it on their site. This is quote, it came from the Telegraph. British authorities have called on European Union to stop making, quote, useless comments, unquote, about talks between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. This was reported by the Telegraph. It's reported that London is increasingly concerned about the public statements made by figures such as Emmanuel Macron, Friedrich Merz, and Kaja Kallas. The British fear that making public demands to the United States president may have unpleasant consequences and lead him to excluding Europe from the negotiations altogether. Insiders from the publication note that Keir Starmer hasn't made a public comment at all. That is fascinating, right? Where they're like, Daddy may not allow us to be involved in conversations about European security. and we are Europe. That is amazing.
And but the only qualification I put on that, of course, is Britain is not part of the European Union, and
Not anymore. That's true.
and Britain, after Brexit, has been especially reliant on NATO and leaning on the US to exaggerate its Russophobia, to have any real influence in Europe, in the diplomatic game in Europe. So
Right.
in some ways, Britain could easily be the biggest loser in this whole of the four sides on the four states on the NATO side: EU, Britain, US, and Ukraine. Apart from Ukraine, but Britain would be could lose, its 100-year agreement with the rump Ukraine state. It could
Yes.
lose access to minerals. It could lose the base of all its East European intelligence operations, all its sort of, James Bond games and all this sort of stuff. So it I think, is in a particularly vulnerable position, and they probably don't want to do it. And I think there's probably there's different sort of interests in play with the European Union partners as well, because they are housing, more so than Britain, they are housing the refugees. They're on the border. They've got a lot of the social problems that are following on. They will be presented with the economic dilemma of how do they integrate Ukraine into the European economic zone somehow, when it's an absolute basket case after this war, and an extremely expensive basket case, which also is not going to work very well for some of the agricultural sort of states in Europe as well. So there's some real tensions on this side, which is why, in some ways, I think the Alaska summit is likely to focus on things, if you like, that America can actually deliver on, because at the moment it can't actually deliver on what Europe says. It can't totally deliver even on what Ukraine says, but it can deliver
Explain
on
that.
its
Explain that
direct
part.
actions.
That it can't deliver on. Explain that part for me.
Well, I mean, Zelensky's acting up. He's acting defiantly. He's in a politically weak situation as well. There's a lot of rumbling going on within Ukraine itself. There's a whole corruption agency issue. There's allegations about his personal corruption, and there's allegedly a tape of him, talking about laundering huge amounts of money. So probably should be careful legally here, but so he's in a really, really sort of, I guess, vulnerable situation, and but Trump is going to be forcing a choice on him in terms of these, land swaps, which I interpret as they're not actually agreements about territory. I think they're just agreements about troop movements. So I think Trump's just, sort of used a general term to sort of describe that. But I suspect what they're really talking about is, Ukraine moves out of the 4 oblasts that have been constitutionally included into Russia,
Right.
and potentially Russia moves out of Sumy and Kharkiv oblasts, where they have, small slivers of troops, or some sort of compromise in between. And, there's been speculation in some of the Ukrainian and other European media during the last, 48 hours about these various deals and what people are talking about, whether, this is about the front line, or the 4 oblasts, or 2 oblasts, and Kherson and Zaporozhye sort of are on the front line. But the Russian foreign ministry I just saw a report just in the last half hour or so, has said that it will not be removing its troops from Zaporozhye and Kherson. So,
Right. Those are part of the Russian constitution.
they're going to take the view that it's it's part of Russia now. I mean, they've got a Russian governor and all this sort of stuff, all the legal structures. So rather than thinking of them as sort of land swaps, if you think of them as just troop withdrawals to enable a negotiation around the final settlement in terms of territorial, agreements, then I think I mean, that process is going to take months, years even. But potentially there's an initial agreement to at least do the troop withdrawals. But I guess the Russians will have to say to America, okay, well, let's say they say, okay, we'll pull our troops back out of Sumy and Kharkiv because, they're not part of Russia, so we've got no business being there. We only went in there because, you invaded Kursk Oblast. But you've got to show your bona fides, I guess, your good faith to, prove to us that this is not going to be a deception. This is not going to be a con. So, get the Ukrainians either to pull out or you do something that's directly within your control that will have the same effect, i.e. withdraw intelligence support, withdraw your mercenaries and operatives, whatever, all those kind of things. So if I suspect that's going to be the nature of the, land swap sort of discussion. It's more about a troop withdrawal to enable a ceasefire. It may not even... and presumably it will take some time to organise how exactly you do that, all that kind of stuff. But I think that's what we're going to say. And then I guess the flow on from that is there's also a lot of talk in the Ukrainian press that if more the Ukrainian dissident press, if I could use that term, that if Zelensky pulls out, let's say, of Donetsk and Lugansk, then that is going to create a political problem for him internally in Ukraine. I mean, it's a kind of de facto admission of defeat because since 2014, that's what it's all been about. The Slavyansk was the heartland, if you like, of the sort of resistance back in 2014. Resistance isn't quite the right term, but the rebellion against the sort of neo-Nazi regime in Ukraine, so he's either going to have to do what Trump says, or risk losing a lot of this, intelligence support, or even potentially, as you say, get removed. Yeah.
I agree with you on the Zelensky thing. That on some level that explains his motivation, right?
Yeah.
It's like every Ukrainian that I feed to the Russian wood chipper is one more hour of life that I get to breathe.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump coming in with some kind of deal is effectively either I'm fleeing, I am dying, I'm going to be deposed politically and put into a prison cage when a reckoning takes place. So yeah, I get that angle. One thing, control of Zelensky. You make a point, and you make a good point. After going through Minsk 1, 2 Istanbul agreements, after watching Trump blow off the JCPOA, blow off the INF treaties, after watching him lie to Iran's face and then attack Iran after the fact, the U.S. has no trust, meaning there's no trust left on anybody around the world stage in the United States. Russia is not going to accept, meaning they're going to be like, show me first. They're not going to accept this notion of, okay, we'll take your word for it, like they did with Merkel, where Putin takes Merkel's word for it, they pull back, and Ukraine builds up this massive military with Merkel saying we effectively lied. I don't see that happening this time around. I would imagine there's a huge amount of cynicism built into the Kremlin at this point. And one last point that I want you to get you to respond on. So I agree that Zelensky is very loud, but I think Zelensky is very loud because he thinks that media and political leaders in Europe would effectively back him in keeping the war going to keep him effectively alive or keep him making money off of European and American leaders. So Trump came out and said this in the press conference the other day. And I think this is directly aimed at exactly what you are saying when you're talking about this. This is, okay, right here, perfect. I'm going to flip over to this. I'm going to get your take on this. And here, and here.
Parameters. Now, I may leave and say, good luck, and that'll be the end. I may say this is not going to be settled. I mean, there are those that believe that Putin wanted all of Ukraine. I happen to be one of them, by the way. I think if it weren't for me, he would not be even talking to anybody else right now. But I'm going to meet with him. We're going to see what the parameters are. I'm then going to call up President Zelensky and the European leaders right after the meeting, yeah. And I'm going to tell them what kind of a deal. I'm not going to make a deal. It's not up to me to make a deal. I think a deal should be made for both. I think Russia has to get back into building their country. It's a massive country. I think they have 11 time zones, if you can believe it. It's a massive, it's by far, from the standpoint of land, it's by far the largest. They have tremendous potential in Russia to do well. They're not doing well. Their economy is not doing well right now because it's been very well disturbed by this. It doesn't help when the president of the United States tells their largest or second largest oil buyer that we're putting a 50% tariff on.
Okay, Trump is going into a lot of just mendaciousness at this point. But the one thing that he does point out, though, is, look, it's not up for me to make a deal. And ultimately, he threatens to walk. Like in that press conference, he said it, like, look, if I can't make a deal, fair enough. I can always leave. I can always walk. That's not targeted at the Russians. That's targeted at the Europeans and Zelensky, who know that they can't necessarily support the war without the United States being part of the war.
Yeah.
And by the way, one last point, Vance said something similar. Vance was like, we can't keep buying weapons. We can't keep supporting these guys. If Europe wants to buy weapons from us, they can do so, and they can do this on their own. With the caveat being, we don't have the weapons to sell, not for several years before they are manufactured.
You see, I mean, it's interesting when people talk about negotiations, like you were talking about maximalist demands and you know, there's the art of the deal stuff and all that kind of thing. But, you know, like as a former government official, you get trained a lot in negotiation skills because half your life is spent negotiating with, you know, people who don't like you very much. And a little bit of a whinge there as an ex-bureaucrat. But, you know, the standard methodology for really skillful negotiation was developed in, you know, these people in Harvard in the sort of 70s and 80s, the whole getting to yes kind of thing. And one of the things they always recommend you have is a BATNA, which is a best alternative to negotiated agreement, which is basically your walkout clause. Now, so Trump is basically saying, yeah, of course I've got a you know, best alternative to negotiated agreement. It's no skin off my nose if Europe gets, you know, stuck with this problem. It's no skin off my nose, basically, if Ukraine folds. They've had a good go at it. We've given them everything. I gave them the javelins, you know. I even sort of talked tough to Modi to try to force Putin to the summit, all this sort of stuff. But in the end, he can. I mean, he can withdraw, I guess, from the war. But I think from a Russian point of view, if he withdraws from the war, that's fine by Russia,
that's my
really,
point.
Isn't it? Exactly.
That's my point, right? Like, that's purely towards.
I think that's right. If I were them, that would be my objective, which is to say, withdraw or at least mitigate America's involvement in the war. And then you've got a house of cards in Ukraine, a lot of wind, making it very unstable, and Europe who especially if US plays really hard ball with NATO command and everything like that, have very little they can do militarily, and an enormous problem and a debt and a kind of political moral debt to Zelensky as well. And I think that's partly also what I think what Europe's also doing to some degree is, hanging on to the dead man, to prove to him that, they were loyal to the last minute. Unlike those scummy Americans. So
But they have to know that it is collapsing. That's the part that gets.
Of course they know. Of course they know. But
the ship is sinking.
The ship's sinking, but it's sinking on their real estate. So the shipwreck will be, on their real estate. It's not American real estate. It's they've got a rusty old car in the front of their car, and at some point they'll get around to fixing it up, but they're not gonna.
I see. So you're saying that they want Ukraine to know that we were with you to the very end.
We were with you to the very end.
Goes to the very end. Don't be mad at us.
Don't be mad at us. Yeah, we weren't the one who stabbed you in the back. And, that's also going to be a social issue. These extremists are already developing the sort of stab in the back kind of theories. There's going to be a lot of this sort of social tension, I guess. So I think they really, I don't think it's a great strategy, but also Europe's not in a great position really either. So they're sort of saying, we know this is going down. We won't carry any of the. We want, and we know Trump's trying to get out without any blame being attached to him. We're not going to let him get away with it, kind of thing.
Wow.
In a political sense, but then when I look at this also as like ex-government official, beyond all the spinning and how it's perceived and playing to the base and everything like that, you've just got a absolutely enormous problem here of a war that is absolutely collapsing, and everyone really does need to find a way to shut it down. But it's really, really difficult to actually find that route. So I think there's going to have to be some, clever thinking about process and timelines, if you like. And so, maybe some sort of agreement to a ceasefire, even if there's an expectation that it might not be implemented immediately, which will only increase the pressure on Ukraine because, as the Defence Politics Asia guy was saying, this is really, it's really getting desperate on the front line.
Mm-hmm.
But then with the expectation that there'll be a process that will potentially take years, I think, really, in terms of the broader conflict resolution around actually what the Ukrainian state is, because, at this point, there's not actually a functional, legitimate government in Ukraine. So before anyone can really negotiate with Ukraine, that functional, legitimate government is going to have to be constituted in some way. Yeah. There's already people within the Ukrainian Rada talking about, wanting to see changes. And so, we could see a sort of I could even imagine people wanting to put together some sort of like a government of national unity, which is like a caretaker government that would restore civil rights, restore political parties, blah, 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 blah. And then in, 12 months, 24 months, then would hold an election. But you can't hold an election. There's no way you could hold a valid election in Ukraine now. It's not like Australia or America. There are no legal political opposition. Journalists are put on kill lists. People are in jail for disagreements. So it's gonna take some time to do that. And surely the Russians know that. Surely the Russians have reasonable human intelligence about the internal state of Ukraine. Even just like you don't even need, special skills. You just need to read the Ukrainian media like I do here in Melbourne, and it's obvious that things are in a really parlous sort of way. So,
wow, that's a toughie. I mean,
yeah, it's not.
even
I mean, it's not going to be easy to sort of solve this in a practical way. So I think people should have pretty low expectations of the summit. I mean, there'll be hoopla about it, and there'll be more hoopla, I think, coming from the Americans than from the Russians. But I think the actual practical agreements will be pretty small and pretty sort of process oriented.
Well, Trump said, "I'm going to feel them out," which made me think, okay, feeling somebody out is not really an agreement or a deal. That's just kind of getting what is possible in regards to some kind of outcome, which is a little weird to me. I wouldn't think that Putin would go into a negotiation if the context of the negotiation hadn't already been set. And so it's like, are you really going in blind in a sense? I mean, you're dealing with a wild card with Donald Trump. Looks like you would want to know what you guys are talking about.
That's why I also think it's significant that Rubio and Lavrov are participating in the summit. I mean, when I watch Donald Trump, he looks to me like a bluffer. Lots of people are saying this, that he's like, you just listen to him. He's sort of randomly sort of throwing in pieces of information that he's picked up in a briefing and sort of trying to sound credible and like he's making all the calls on all the big issues. Gee, there's 11 time zones in Russia. That was interesting when they told me that. Like, gee, I learned that at school, Donald, but anyhow.
It's also random stats that are wrong. Like he was like, 80% of the people want the war to end or something like that. And it's like, dude, it's 69. I saw the same Gallup poll at 69. It's like those are just random things.
So I see Trump as sort of loosely presiding over a divided government, which have different factions and different interests and all that kind of stuff, and but wanting to always be the showman who sort of brings the house down, kind of thing. Is the lead act always. But I suspect Rubio is actually playing quite a significant role behind the scenes. I might be totally wrong about that. It might be better to say, I think a good case scenario is Rubio is acting reasonably professionally with the State Department people, and that maybe they're starting to operate some functional diplomacy, at least to get some agreement. I'm not 100% confident about that because I've seen the names of some of the guy who was supposedly in charge of the Russian negotiations is
Keith Kellogg, or
no. Well, there's sort of a guy called Michael Anton who's the kind of the point person, the key official kind of thing. And Michael Anton is a kind of a conservative writer at the Claremont Institute. He's a former chef and used to write about men's fashion. And, he sort of does interesting talks about Machiavelli and Leo Strauss and exactly what he knows about conducting professional diplomacy. I have no idea, but
if I'm not mistaken, he used to work for the Bush administration at one point.
I think that's right, and he certainly worked in the first Trump administration. He wrote an essay like Flight 67 or it was about America being like a pilotless plane sort of going towards disaster. What do you do, kind of thing. So he's a clever man, but he's not a professional diplomat, and his counterparts on the other side are. And there are real skills to negotiating these complex agreements, of understanding the context of, working out, well, how exactly do we manage a ceasefire?
Yeah. Do you think that Putin demands are maximalists? And just to explain what I mean by that, I don't think they are in the way that they sound. Even though, how can I say this? I suspect that they have said the same thing for the last 3 years. And when it came down to the ceasefire, their thing was like, look, if you leave these areas, if you stop sharing intelligence, stop building up your military, stop drafting and press ganging grandpas and grandmas and handicapped people into your military and picking up the peace and delivery guy, we will also stop. Meaning we were willing to have a ceasefire, provided that you are not building up a massive military while we have the ceasefire, and we're willing to engage in talks in this context. Okay, to me, that's rational, right? The notion that I'm going to talk to you while you're building up a gang of lunatics is insane, right? So that's their thing. That's what we want. We are not going to have Minsk 3. This is going to be something else. From the standpoint of the overall settlement, no expansion of NATO, no again, limits on the size of the Ukrainian military. These are our oblasts, plus Crimea. With the notion that if we keep going, we will take Sumy, we will take Kharkov, we will take et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, is there wiggle room in that for Putin to give something that the public would accept, considering? Because one of the things that Reuters pointed out was Russia can't stop the war right now. Like, meaning the public will not accept it, the military would not accept it, and they were not going to accept this notion of investing 100,000 human beings with something that looks like they don't get what they deserve out of a win in this case. Especially, they're not going to take something that makes it look like the United States won or they drew. It's a win, and it needs to be displayed as such for the public. Speaking in, what do you call it, the possibility of the yes, or how to get to yes, is there something that he can credibly give away in the context of still saying, look, this is a win, this is a clear win, while also being able to give something to Trump to save face, where they can walk out saying, all right, we got a deal. This may last for 10 years, this may last for 5, but damn it, we got a deal. Like, is there something that Putin could give in this context that makes this work?
Well, I mean, I guess the question I always encourage you to ask in negotiations is, what is the other party's needs? So, don't just think about what you want, think about what the other party's needs are, and then work out, creative ways in which you can generate options to do that. Right. And to me, I think to some degree, thinking about a longer term process for sort of reconstituting Ukraine post-conflict creates a whole lot of options. Okay, so let's say the baseline is the 4 regions that have already been constitutionally voted into Russia are the 4 regions. Russia could also say, look, yeah, we would like you ultimately to accept these on, international borders and all that sort of stuff, but you don't have to do it immediately. Let's do it at the end of a process of reconstituting Ukraine, which has got to be, government of national unity and peace process and elections at some point. But I've always wondered whether, if you like, the military, people have talked about going to Odessa and, all that sort of stuff. And I think there'd be a lot of reasons why Russia would want to have Odessa, but they wouldn't want to have Odessa if it's just a ruin.
Right.
And, why would there not be a process of referendums in all the different oblasts of Ukraine at some point to say, do you want to live? Do you want this region to be in Russia, in old Ukraine, or in some kind of new Ukraine? And I guess places like who knows what would happen in places like Kharkiv and Sumy. I mean, I think traditionally they were more Russian than they are now, but reportedly places like Odessa, Dnipropetrovsk and stuff like that may well just vote to be part of Russia.
Right.
And if Ukraine goes into a complete meltdown, which is what I'd say is like a 50% scenario, probability scenario, because once the martial laws is lifted, once the open air prison is no longer locked, people are going to get the hell out of there. A lot of people, if they can, will want to get out of there. So the sort of composition of the remaining place will be difficult. The elites are, deeply, deeply corrupt and abusive towards people. So there's getting exploited by one oligarch rather than another oligarch is not all that wonderful. Why don't we go to Russia to live in a decent society, kind of thing? So you could imagine a process that might occur over a period of time where through a process that's acknowledged kind of through national self-determination type processes, there's a devised solution to sort of integrate the various parts of Ukraine into the state that they actually want to be in. And given the international coalition backing Russia now, with India playing a key role now, Jaishankar's going to Moscow next week, I think, and the National Security Advisor was there last week. Modi and Putin have spoken in the last couple of days. Shanghai Cooperation Organization is coming together. You could also see a quite cohesive international alliance around that, and saying, well, the West, you've totally stuffed this country. Why don't you just get the hell out for a while? But you should pay a few reparations, and let's design some processes with a great democracy like India, for example, to establish more genuine, multi. I'm going to say multicultural, but like acceptance of the different ethnic, linguistic, cultural, historical elements of Ukraine into some more genuine federation, even if it means Ukraine becomes, more than one state. Alexei Arestovich has talked about, a significant part going to Russia, the sort of central part being a kind of a neutral Ukraine, and then the sort of, old Galicia sort of area being a separate sort of state to keep the more radical elements happy.
Jeff,
or at least pinned up.
Near utopian. That's too much like right. That is far too much like right. States don't typically vote to decapitate themselves. Like if you ask the U.S., "Hey, would you like to break up?" The U.S. would never allow that question.
No, but the Soviet Union broke up. I mean,
they did, but they didn't want to.
But Ukraine doesn't want to either. Yeah.
Exactly.
But ultimately, I mean, they do. I mean, there was partition, like Pakistan after Pakistan and India was a partition, but then Pakistan used to be West Pakistan and East Pakistan until 1971, when Bangladesh liberation war led to a separate state of Bangladesh. So, these things do. There was South Sudan formed out of Sudan not so long ago. So these sort of things do happen from time to time.
On this one, because utopian. I didn't mean it poorly. I just meant it like that sounds too much like right.
Well, it'll be a good outcome. There are many worse outcomes that could happen. And perhaps more likely. But I mean, I could imagine that you could construct a process to go that way. But whether America and Europe would accept it is another question.
And how do you do that without destroying the government in and of itself? Like, it's one thing if Russia goes to Kiev and they smashed the state and they recobbled the state together. Okay, that's one thing. I get that because at that point
Yeah.
you're reconstituting something that says, okay, we have a unity government, and you have the Russians who are ensuring that the unity government operates, etc. That's a little weird, but I can kind of see that. Zelensky is losing his mind. And short of Donald Trump telling a CIA agent, take him out. But then it's like, okay, but whoever follows him is just as much of a lunatic. Zelensky is not any better. The other woman that was in parliament, she's not any better. And Andre Telizhenko, he's one of my, he's a Ukrainian whistleblower that comes on the show. He pointed out, he's like, look, any of these people that you effectively get are just as bad on some level as Zelensky. Unless you find somebody who's more malleable, but again, that person is more malleable to the United States or to some kind of oligarch. Like it's almost like you have to pull this stuff out root and branch, as Mark would say, and do something new. Like meaning, how do you get that unity government? I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, and look, the initial form of it is not going to be great. I mean, it will presumably be Zelensky's party and Tymoshenko, and I mean, I don't know all the different factions all that well, but presumably there's like a transitional government type situation. But I mean, the thing is, the Ukrainian state is effectively demolished now. I mean, it's deeply corrupt. There's this this Mindich apartment scandal where allegedly there's a tape of Volodymyr Zelensky talking about some curious activities he was engaged in, which I won't say more about for legal reasons. But you may have information about, related in the apartment of the guy who I think owned the production company. This guy called, I think it's Timur Mindich, who's known as Zelensky's wallet.
Wait, say that again. I didn't hear that one. There were two scandals that I knew about. I knew about the one where they said it was $5 billion in cryptocurrency that Zelensky was trying to use a bank in France.
For a bank,
yeah. Then there's the other one that I was going to cover on the show where they were talking about putting in his inner circle, putting in 10 million euros a week to a bank in the UAE, giving it to various people who are in Ukraine, which is what Nabu and Sapo found when Zelensky flipped out about it. What is this one? I hadn't heard this one. I have to look.
Well, the story is, and I think certainly the sort of laundering money for a European bank, which apparently there's also some German police might have information on as well, relates to the corruption scandal, because closing the corruption agencies, because one theory was Zelensky had found out that a recording had been made of him and various other people in the Ukrainian regime talking about some of their activities. I hope viewers don't mind, I'll talk a little bit vaguely about this. Talking about some of their activities in this apartment of this, let's call him an oligarch, Mindich, Zelensky's wallet. And that was one of the issues that led to the sort of crackdown on the Nabu and Sapu, the corruption agencies. So, and that is, and there's some politicians in Ukraine who allegedly, reportedly, all those caveats, etc., selectively releasing this kind of thing. They're not talking about the Epstein tapes in Ukraine. They're talking about the Mindich apartment tapes, and but yeah, I mean, more. So there's all that corruption. There's just the demoralisation of the public. There's the catastrophic impact on the society of loss of so many people in the war, and also through refugee flight. And you know, they've got a huge trade deficit, the prospective currency crisis. They, totally dependent on foreign aid to actually pay their pensions, and they may not even be able to do that. So that they, I mean, Donald Trump is correct to consider it a, failed project that you need to declare bankruptcy on. So I mean, at some point, the international community, to use that sort of phrase, is going to have to kind of devise some sort of post-bankruptcy sort of solution for the Ukrainian state. And the worst case scenario, which is also what Alexei Arestovich talks about, is there'll just be a kind of low-grade civil war for several years.
Wait, so
no
they
one,
locked in civil war for several years?
yeah,
They were already in
grade.
civil war.
Well, yeah, but it will take some sort of different form. Maybe they'll. I don't entirely know exactly how, but and he sees this as being related to sort of historical characteristics of Ukraine, and it's sort of, he says there's still oligarchs and Cossacks and peasants in Ukraine, and no one's really in between, and it creates a very unstable sort of social structure. But it's I don't know if that's a fair judgment, but the fact is, it's a failed state now.
You
It's
have,
a failed state
you have
now,
about 50 more
and
minutes because I want to get into that. This is a conversation that I had with Sarah where she was reading Clash of Civilizations, and
oh
her and I
yeah,
got into
Huntington.
this back and forth on this notion of like, I don't think it's true. I think that fundamentally what you end up with is if you leave countries to their own devices, those countries will grow, develop, et cetera, especially when you add in things like technology and abundance and modernity. I think left to their own devices, I don't think people want to pick up a gun and shoot somebody in the face or be shot in the face,
No.
especially if your needs are being met. Like, meaning, okay, I may not like that guy. That guy, I don't like the way the guy talks. I don't like the way the guy prays. I don't like the fact that the woman is in a burqa or whatever.
Yeah.
However, do I want to do anything about it if my needs are met? No. Usually it doesn't run that deep. There are some people that are hardcore racists, but those people are going to be few and far between in the context of society, as opposed to the larger people. I just want to get my hamburger. Just want to feed my kids. I just want to go to work. I just want to have sex with my wife, girlfriend, mistress, whatever. Like, I get the sense that even in the context of countries, if you think of all of the wars that we have today, those things are pushed. The Ukrainian project, if it hadn't been pushed with CIA, MI6, all of these other people seeding divisions in the country, it would have never blown up. Same thing with, you could pick any random country, Syria wouldn't have blown up. It seems like the norm is that there's an enzyme that is called geopolitical interest of, let's say, an empire that is aggravating and agitating these things. And what you're seeing is an explosion based on the agitation, as opposed to leaving them to their own devices, in which case they will strive towards independence and freedom, because that's just kind of the way people are. Give me your take on that. Am I too Pollyannish? Is this me being utopian?
No, look, I agree with you, and I mean, I don't really like the Huntington civilization kind of model, because I tend to agree with you that these things are not fixed states; they're sort of processes, and people can sort of shape and develop in different opportunity. Like people used to say, like the British used to say, the Hindus were hopeless and pathetic, and there's so many examples of that around the world. We all know about it, and people, I think, are perhaps doing that, and Ukraine has had bad luck, I guess. But it sort of suffered the sort of post-Soviet crisis in the same way as Russia did, without a whole lot of help from America, except the help that it America offered was really, to send it down the primrose path, as John Mearsheimer says,
Yeah.
which was no help at all, and has actually been, has fueled this nationalist independence sort of ideology, this Russian hatred, this which is in a way distorts the actual cultural historical traditions of Ukraine. And it's been a very oligarchical society. Compared to Russia, it never had its sort of 1999, 2000 moment. It never sort of got back on its feet and decided to resist the oligarchs and manage its processes well. It just got seduced by this sort of, let's do a deal with America and the EU and then we'll all be rich. And it's just been tragic. But you have to feel for the people. I mean, I just feel so bad for the people of Ukraine that, this absurd imperial project to just, dominate the world has basically destroyed this country in the most and destroyed real people's lives in very real tangible way. It's not just geopolitics, it's all sorts of things, like some of the images you were showing before, and it's just so sad. But if any of us were in Ukraine now, I mean, what choice would we make? Would we want to say, okay, I'm gonna work hard for the institutions and try to rebuild Ukraine to get it back on its feet in the next, 80 years and rebuild its political institutions, or, let me just move to Germany
Russia,
or Russia and just lead a simple life and forget all this horror that's been happening for the last 10 to 20 years,
No, Jeff, I agree with you, man. I on the station, I used to say this is a catastrophe. Most of the people who voted, they voted for Zelensky because they wanted a peace candidate. That's not what they got. That's not what they got.
Yep.
Jeff, I have appreciated this conversation. It's like I always appreciated these conversations. I always learn something from you in these convos. Thank you for this. I really do. Especially coming from a governmental point of view where you have to deal with diplomacy as opposed to being a YouTuber and an analyst where you're just screaming in the void.
I mean, it's fun being a YouTuber, but ultimately governments actually have to do something.
right. It's like we used to have responsibilities. Now you can just be like, complain. Joe Biden, one time when we were at the Joe Biden Putin summit, I was covering it for the network, and the woman was like screaming at Joe Biden, like, "Did you give it to Putin? Did you, etc." And Joe Biden, exasperated, angry, yells at her, "You don't understand." And what he was trying to tell that woman is like, I have responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
Like I have to make sure that we don't end up in a war. We lost communication. We had no communication with them. And you're screaming at me as if, like some kind of mythical zero-sum thing, as opposed to I'm functioning within the context of a space that somebody is pushing back on me as I'm functioning in.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that. You're just screaming in the void.
Yeah.
Jeff Rich.
Exactly.
Jeff Rich is an author, historian, podcaster who worked 33 years in government, now retired. He currently lives in Melbourne, Australia. Jeff has spent a lifetime studying history and with knowledge of historical currents can help give context to our political environment. You can find Jeff on YouTube at The Burning Archive. Again, a damn good show. And you can find him on Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. Jeff, thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay? Have a good night.
Thanks, Jamal. Have a great rest of the show.
Thank you. Bye-bye.